They say we are made of stories, the ones we are told, the ones we live, and the ones that live in our bones long before we are born. For Genesis Genna Walker, the narrative of her life was a quiet, unwritten thing, a book still waiting for a proper beginning. At 28, she moved through the vibrant, humming city of Atlanta, a city pulsing with the legacy of 100 movements, yet she felt a stillness inside herself, a disconnect from the rhythm of the streets. Her days were spent in a cubicle, the fluorescent lights of the accounting firm a sterile contrast to the sun-drenched Georgia heat outside. The scent of stale coffee and printer toner clung to her, a ghost of a life she was living but not truly inhabiting. It was a life of numbers, and she craved a life of meaning. Her evenings were her only escape. In the small, makeshift workshop of her apartment, the air thickened with the earthy scent of beeswax and the faint metallic tang of silver. The low rumble of Atlanta traffic outside her window was a constant, distant baseline to the delicate, focused work of her hands. She worked with small, intricate tools, a jeweler's saw that hummed like a diligent bee, a hammer that made quiet, satisfying taps. She wasn't creating for anyone, she was creating for a forgotten part of herself, a whisper she couldn't quite hear. A profound sense of loss lingered from the passing of her grandmother, the matriarch who was a pillar of strength and an artist in her own right. Genna felt the absence of her grandmother's stories, her hands, and the talent that, she now realized, had never been fully celebrated by the world. It was a silent wound, a longing for something she never knew she could miss so deeply. One humid evening, while searching for a spare chain, she found it, a dusty, old chest tucked away in the back of a closet. The wood felt rough under her fingertips, and when she opened it, the scent of old paper and dried herbs filled the room, a perfume from a different time. Inside lay a treasure trove, her grandmother's detailed sketchbooks, their pages filled with intricate designs of jewelry inspired by African symbols and cultural stories. There were notes, too, written in a neat, flowing cursive detailing the meaning behind each piece, a spiral for the journey of life, a geometric pattern for the strength of community. The real discovery, however, was in the bottom of the chest. Tucked beneath the papers was a beautiful, unfinished necklace. The gold had been partially polished, one half gleaming with a promise of brilliance, the other half still dull and scarred. A single, flawless carnelian stone, a deep red that held the warmth of 1,000 sunsets, was waiting to be set in the center. Holding the necklace, Genna felt a jolt, a direct line connecting her to her grandmother's unfulfilled legacy. This was not just a piece of metal, it was a story, a narrative that had been silenced and left incomplete. Her grandmother hadn't just made jewelry, she had woven history and identity into every link and curve. Genna finally understood the whispers she had been hearing. It was the call of her ancestry, an invitation to pick up the tools her grandmother had put down. A powerful new emotion took root in her, a mix of fierce determination and a gentle grief. She would not let this story be forgotten. She would finish the necklace and, in doing so, begin a new chapter. The idea sparked in her mind, a fire waiting for its fuel. She would not just honor her grandmother's memory, she would build something entirely new. She would create a brand, a luxury brand of jewelry inspired by the richness of African American culture. This was her new beginning, and she would name it a Marca de Joyas Afro, a brand born from a legacy, a promise, and a deep-seated resolve to make sure the world saw the brilliance it had overlooked. The morning sun, warm and generous, poured through Jenna's apartment window, illuminating a cloud of fine silver dust that hung in the air like a metallic haze. The workshop, once a quiet sanctuary, now buzzed with a newfound energy. The scent of coffee and burnt beeswax mingled with the sharp tang of metal filings. Destiny Johnson, Jenna's best friend, was perched on a stool, her vibrant red hair a splash of color against the drab gray walls. She held Jenna's old phone, its camera pointed at a pile of tools and raw materials. Her face, a mask of focused intensity, was broken only by a quick, impatient sigh. "Okay, Jen, you gotta be more dramatic," Destiny said, her voice a mix of humor and seriousness. "You can't just say, 'This is a hammer.' You have to say, 'This is the tool that beats the old into the new.' You have to tell a story." Jenna, with a fine polishing cloth in her hand, looked up from a piece of rough-cut amber. "A story, Destiny? I'm making jewelry, not a documentary on the meaning of life." Destiny rolled her eyes, a flash of white against her dark skin. "It's called marketing, Jen. We're not selling rocks and metal. We're selling magic, the legacy, the vibe. This is a marca de joyas afro, not Genesis's little Etsy shop." The two of them, in their playful back-and-forth banter, were the embodiment of the story's good humor. They spent the next few hours in a hilarious, chaotic cycle of trial and error. They attempted to film a behind-the-scenes video that went wrong in every possible way. Jenna's hands, normally so steady, fumbled the delicate chain. Destiny's vibrant hair kept falling into the shot, and the harsh glare of the cheap ring light made everything look flat. The digital world, it seemed, was more unforgiving than a jeweler's loupe. Destiny, with her infectious laugh, would just delete the clips and declare, "We'll get it right. This is an adventure, Jenna, and every adventure has some, let's call them learning moments." This initial conflict was not a single person, but the mountain of difficulties that stood between Jenna's dream and her reality. The first major hurdle was capital. To truly honor her grandmother's legacy, she needed to work with better materials and professional tools. But her savings account, like a shrinking hourglass, was running low. Her father, a man who believed in security above all else, was worried. "Jenna, you have a good job," he said, his voice a low, heavy rumble. This is a hobby, a beautiful one, but a hobby." Jenna knew he was trying to protect her from the same disappointments her grandmother had faced. The next day, armed with a carefully prepared business plan and the unwavering belief that her brand was worth it, she went to a bank. It was a cold, formal place, smelling of polished marble and unspoken judgment. The loan officer, a man with a stiff collar and an even stiffer smile, looked at her presentation. He listened patiently as she spoke about ancestral symbols, cultural narratives, and the untapped market for luxury jewelry celebrating Black culture. The silence that followed her final words was heavy, thick with dismissal. The officer's voice when he finally spoke was polite but final. He said her business was too niche and lacked a proven market. It was not a personal rejection, but a systemic one. It was the gatekeeping that her grandmother had faced, a ghost from the past now haunting her present. Jenna returned to her apartment, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Her initial optimism had been shattered. She told Destiny about the meeting, her voice trembling with frustration. "They don't get it, Des. They don't see the value. They just see risk." Destiny, ever the optimist, didn't let the despair linger. She looked at Jenna's laptop, which was open to a social media feed filled with fashion influencers and creative entrepreneurs. "So they don't get it. Fine, we'll show them." She took a deep breath, her eyes sparkling with an audacious idea. "We're going about this all wrong. We're trying to get a loan to prove our value to them. What if we prove our value to the people who actually matter, the people who will wear your art? What if we bypass the gatekeepers completely?" Destiny's plan was as simple as it was brilliant. TikTok isn't just for dance crazes, Jenna. It's a place for creators, for storytellers. People love the process. They love seeing how something is made. We won't just post pictures of the finished product. We'll show them the journey, the hands, the tools, the inspiration. We'll build a community first, and then we'll sell to them directly. Jenna's eyes widened. She had been so focused on the traditional path, the bank, the retail space, that she hadn't seen the vibrant, chaotic, and democratized world of social media as a genuine alternative. It was a risky idea, but it felt right. It was a form of revenge against a system that had tried to silence her grandmother's voice. She would use its own tools to amplify her own. They started planning immediately. The first video would be simple, direct, and raw. It would not be about sales, but about an invitation. Jenna would hold the unfinished necklace, the one that had started it all, and she would speak directly to the camera, to the community she hoped to find. The chapter ends with Jenna, her hand steady once more, the warmth of the carnelian stone and the necklace against her palm. She looks at the glowing ring light and the tiny camera lens, a universe of possibility in front of her. She's ready to begin. The creator is awake. The digital world, for a brief, bewildering moment, was a symphony of chaos. The gentle chiming of her phone, a sound she was used to ignoring, morphed into a relentless, insistent bell. Jenna, hunched over her workbench, polishing a piece of malachite until it gleamed like a deep green eye, didn't notice at first. It was Destiny, her face a perfect portrait of stunned disbelief, who broke the silence. She held up her phone, the screen a blinding white cascade of notifications and comments. "Jenna," Destiny's voice was a barely there whisper, It's going viral." The video they had posted, raw and honest, had found its audience. The camera's unblinking eye had captured the sincerity in Jenna's hands, the unspoken story in her grandmother's unfinished necklace. The video wasn't selling a product, it was sharing a legacy, and the community had responded with a collective, resounding, "We see you." The comments flooded in, a digital tide of support and awe. "This is the kind of jewelry I've been looking for all my life. Where can I buy this? Your grandmother would be so proud." Their initial triumph was quickly followed by an avalanche of new perengues, the struggles of success. Orders poured in faster than they could possibly fulfill them. The tiny workshop, once a haven, became a scene of beautiful mayhem. Gold wire tangled with silver chains, gemstones lay in colorful disarray, and the air was thick with the scent of urgency. The humor of their adventure was still there, but now it was laced with a frantic, wide-eyed energy. They pulled all-nighters, fueled by caffeine and a shared, delirious sense of purpose, trying to keep up. The weight of it all settled on Jenna. She had the demand, but not the means to scale. The delicate craftsmanship her grandmother had perfected could not be rushed. Just when she felt she was about to drown in a sea of unfulfilled orders, a quiet knock came at her door. It was Malik Carter, a man whose hands were as weathered and wise as his face. He was an old friend of her grandmother, a master jeweler in his own right, and he had heard through the grapevine about her new venture. Malik's workshop, smelling of seasoned wood and worn leather, was a direct counterpoint to their digital chaos. He listened to their story, his expression unreadable as Destiny excitedly explained their TikTok strategy. He ran a calloused thumb over the surface of Jenna's wax molds, his eyes narrowed in a mix of professional critique and deep, personal nostalgia. He was initially skeptical of their internet hustle, a world away from the quiet, deliberate process he had mastered. But then, Jenna showed him the unfinished necklace, the one that had started it all. She explained her motivation to honor a forgotten legacy.
He saw not just a piece of jewelry, but the same fiery passion that had once burned in her grandmother's eyes. He saw the past and the future intertwined. He agreed to mentor her, to guide her through the business of scaling a small artisanal brand. The next phase of their adventure began. Malik taught Jenna the art of efficiency without sacrificing soul, while Destiny, the digital guru, transformed Jenna's online presence. Following the lead of successful Black creators, Jenna launched FaceTime Fridays on TikTok. These live sessions were not just for selling, they were for storytelling. The camera would zoom in on her hands as she worked, the glimmer of a gemstone, the deliberate curl of a wire. The indirect dialogue of the narrative would capture the energy of these sessions, Jenna's enthusiastic descriptions, the audience's lively questions, and the palpable sense of a community being built in real time. Jenna would share the cultural significance behind each design, and the screen would fill with hearts and messages of solidarity. Overwhelmed but fortified, Jenna ended each Friday feeling a profound shift. She was no longer a single artist working alone in a room. She was a creator. And her audience was not just her customer base, but her co-conspirators in this act of creative revenge and empowerment. With the hum of Malik's polishing machine and the glow of the screen, she felt the ghosts of the past and the energy of the future converging. She was on the right path, and she wasn't alone.
Success, Jenna had come to learn, was a double-edged sword. One side was the exhilarating rush of creation, the joy of seeing her art connect with people she had never met. The other side, she was about to discover, was a cold, sharp edge. It was a normal Tuesday, the workshop humming with a comfortable, productive energy. The clink of tools, the scent of hot wax, and the quiet, focused rhythm of her work were a familiar comfort. She was scrolling through her social media feed, taking a rare break, when she saw it. An ad, bold and intrusive, from a major jewelry conglomerate. The image showed a new collection, the Urban Echo collection, and a sickening wave of cold recognition washed over her. The pieces were not just similar, they were a brazen, cheap imitation of her grandmother's sketches. The intricate, geometric patterns, the raw, earthy textures, and even the deliberate choice of certain gemstones, it was all there, stripped of its soul and mass-produced for a mass market. The company's ad copy, with its slick, hollow words about honoring cultural inspiration, felt like a slap in the face. It was a moment of true, visceral anger. The blood thrummed in her ears, and the tools on her workbench seemed to blur. She felt the same frustration that must have burned in her grandmother's heart decades ago, the quiet, insidious injustice of having your work, your culture, and your story stolen by a system that had never given you a seat at the table. It was the antagonist, faceless and powerful, finally showing its true form. Her fury was a quiet, contained thing. Malik, seeing the rigid tension in her shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on her phone, asked what was wrong. Jenna, her voice a low, trembling whisper, showed him the ad. He took a deep breath. His old hands, so used to shaping beauty, now clenched in silent rage. He told her that this was a classic story, one he had seen played out countless times in his long career, a system that valued profit over art and legacy. Destiny, her usual humor replaced by a steely determination, spoke up. She knew that a legal battle was a non-starter. They lacked the capital, the resources, and the time. Jenna knew it too. This was not a fight she could win in a courtroom. It was a fight for the narrative. Destiny's suggestion was simple, audacious, and brilliant.
"We're not fighting a company, Jen," she said, her eyes fixed on Jenna's. "We're fighting a story. They're trying to sell a lie. We're going to tell the truth. We're going to use the one weapon they can't copy, our community." The plan was born, a form of poetic revenge powered by authenticity. They would not respond with anger, but with storytelling. The campaign, which Destiny christened "Stories Are Not Sold, They Are Rescued," was a masterclass in digital guerrilla warfare. The first video was a side-by-side comparison of Jenna's original designs, taken from her grandmother's sketches, and the corporate rip-offs. The video's tone was calm, but the message was a thunderclap. It was a simple, elegant exposition of cultural appropriation. But the follow-up videos were where the story's good humor truly came to life. They created memes that mocked the corporate collection's generic, lifeless aesthetic, using comedy to disarm their opponent. They asked their followers to share their own stories of heritage and inspiration, creating a viral hashtag that turned the fight from a single brand's struggle into a collective movement. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The algorithm, which had once felt like a capricious god, now served as their army. Comments poured in, not just of support, but of outrage. The videos were shared by hundreds of thousands, then millions. People began using the hashtag, sharing their own acts of creation and cultural pride. Jenna's FaceTime Fridays were now a global town hall, a gathering of people united against injustice. The outrage spilled out of the digital world, and news articles started appearing, asking pointed questions about the company's new collection and its origins. Jenna and Destiny weren't just selling jewelry, they were leading a charge. Jenna watched the movement grow, a powerful, humbling force. She wasn't a victim, she was a leader. The quiet, talented girl from Atlanta, the one who had felt invisible in her cubicle, was now a public figure, a voice for a cause much larger than herself. The revenge was not about financial ruin. It was about reclaiming a narrative, about using a community to create a justice that the system had denied her. The trial by fire was not a moment of defeat, but of profound, lasting victory.
The digital storm had reached its eye, and in the sudden, eerie calm, a resolution arrived. The conglomerate, battered by the collective force of the viral campaign, issued a public statement. It was a cold, corporate apology, but its meaning was a triumph. They announced the immediate recall of their Urban Echo collection and pledged a significant donation to a fund supporting emerging artists of color. The message was clear. Jenna's campaign had not just won the battle, it had changed the rules of the game. Her revenge was not a destructive act, but a creative one. It was the sweet justice of a story well told, a truth that could not be silenced. Jenna felt a deep, profound sense of relief, a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying, finally lifting from her shoulders. In the glow of her now bustling workshop, with Malik working quietly on a new piece and Destiny fielding calls from news outlets, Jenna found her peace. The chaos of success had settled into a steady, purposeful rhythm. The hum of the polishing machine was no longer a frantic buzz, but a contented purr. Her FaceTime Fridays were now a beacon, not just for sales, but for solidarity. She used her platform to spotlight other Black artists and creators, sharing their work and their stories with her massive audience, an act of true empowerment. Her brand, a marca de joyas afro, had become more than just a business, it was a movement. Jenna's final act was a private one, a moment reserved for herself and a ghost. She took out the unfinished necklace from the dusty chest, the one that had started it all. The polished half gleamed like a golden crescent moon, but the other side remained dark and scarred, a mirror of her grandmother's unfinished journey. She had saved the final perfect carnelian stone for this moment. It was a flawless, deep red stone, cool and smooth to the touch, and it held the warmth of 1,000 memories. With Malik watching over her shoulder, a silent mentor, Jenna carefully positioned the stone. Her hands, once unsteady with doubt, now moved with the confident grace of an artist who knew her purpose. She used a small, delicate hammer, its taps a gentle, percussive hum in the quiet workshop to set the stone in its place. Each tap was a final note in a symphony of legacy, a sound of completion and triumph. The unfinished piece was now a whole. As she held the finished necklace, the gold gleamed under the light, the carnelian stone at its center a vibrant, defiant heart. She saw not just a piece of jewelry, but the entire journey. The grief, the struggle, the viral victory, and the profound, beautiful humor of it all. The story ends with Jenna, in her new, larger workshop, now a vibrant hub of creativity and community. She hangs her grandmother's finished necklace on a stand, a timeless piece of art that represents not just a family legacy, but the power of a people. Her revenge against the system was not a battle of hate, but a campaign of love. Love for her craft, her culture, and her community. And in the final, quiet moments of reflection, the universal truth settles into place, that the greatest stories are not written to be told, but to be lived, and that a legacy, once unfinished, can be completed by a new generation with a little bit of resilience, a lot of humor, and an unwavering belief in the power of a single beautiful stone.